welcome to Supposedly. I'm Jessi, and this is Rue.
Hey, we have some cool stuff to talk about tonight. It's gonna be creepy and fun and weird and yeah.
And Rue has been telling me for the past couple weeks that she's just super pumped about today. She's been doing hella research, so I'm sure we're all gonna enjoy a crazy story from her.
This is my white whale. I'm
Wow.
honestly, like, the show might end after this episode, guys. Like, I don't know that I'm ever gonna top this.
It's not going to.
It's not going to.
Well, before we jump into that and the story that I brought today, which is timely, I think, let's catch up a little bit. So, what's new in your world?
I'm celebrating.
Ooh, yes.
Donald Trump got impeached, part 2.
Part 2, the sequel, yeah.
Yep. Very happy about that. That's super exciting. Let's see. I got my car.
Oh, yay! I'm so happy for you. You can finally, like, drive around and everything now.
Yeah, I'm a grown-up, which is awesome, especially because, like, it snowed literally all this week. So, what else is exciting? That's really about it. I've just been in, like, my research cave for these last couple weeks. What's new with you?
Well, I submitted us for a paranormal television show.
I'm super excited to see what happens with that.
I don't know. I think I put a lot into that email. If we don't get at least the second round, I'm going to be so disappointed because, I mean, I gave that email my all. Can I just say it?
I at least want to find us on, like, a casting agency shitposting Facebook group of them, like, look how hard this girl tried.
No. I think I've got good feelings about it, at least.
I think so.
And then, of course, things are popping off at the house again. We've had 2 things happen since the last time we've spoke, I think.
Oh.
So, okay. Christy was gone a few days ago, and I was just in my room alone. I should start the story by saying that we had kind of an accident happen recently.
Oh.
Rosie, Christy's dachshund, kind of slipped going down the stairs when it was really icy outside.
Oh no.
And hurt her little back. So we took her to the vet, and she's gonna be okay. It just turns out that she has a little bit of a disc condition and back condition that dachshunds tend to develop over time.
Yeah.
And so she was especially sensitive to it. But in the meantime, while Christy's installing some doggy ramps, we have baby gates, which we use throughout the house just for Christy's grandchildren and the cats and the dogs anyway. So everything was gated off, but they couldn't be in Christy's room because they like to be on the bed, which is really high, and Rosie can't be on the bed right now, and we can't have her jumping on things. So Christy's gone. Her bedroom door is shut. The dogs are in the hallway. Kind of our upstairs layer is blocked off, so they can't go downstairs, and they have to stay within the hall in the kitchen and dining room area. And I'm in my room where the cats just like to frequently hang out. No one's in Christy's room. She's been gone for hours. And all of a sudden, a guitar starts strumming in her room.
Like, not like it fell over, like, bong, like, strumming, like, playing?
Like, someone ran their fingers across
like
the
a
guitar.
do-do-do-do-do.
It's like someone just strummed it,
Yeah.
just bong, down the...
Yeah.
And so the dog's ears go up, and they are looking at the door. They didn't even bark, which is weird, because normally they'd go off. And the cats were like, what's that? And I'm like, Christy's in here. Dang. And then last night, when I was at my overnight for work, Christy's door slammed on its own while she was laying in bed.
Oh, no thank you.
She said she called her daughter, and her daughter said, go get the dogs. And Christy's like, nope, they can fend for themselves. I'm not leaving the room. Something doesn't want me out. So we haven't cleared since the Man in the Code incident or anything.
Yeah. Might want to get on that.
I know. It's just, it's weird because it's like it doesn't feel like things are around until things happen.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I remember you saying it had been pretty chill for a while.
Right. There's that. And then on paranormal news as well, The Sims 4 has released a new game pack on the 20th.
Are babies still objects?
Babies are still objects, and don't even get me started on how we need babies in cars before this pack that they're releasing. The pack is on brand, though. It's Sims 4 paranormal stuff, and basically you can have a haunted house, There are cursed objects. You can have a seance as a new event. There's a haunted house lot trait. And there's the return of Gildry the Ghost, who I have no clue who he is, which means to tell me that he's he's probably pretty obscure if I don't know him.
Yeah, I've never heard of him.
And you can have a ghost hunting career.
Oh, that's tight.
Yeah.
Please make the GAC, the Ghost Adventures crew.
I'm sure somebody already has. It's probably already up in the gallery. So that's looking forward to that on the 20th.
Nice.
And I think that's all I've got for you. Popping off house.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it compressed today.
There you go. Before we get too far into it, I do want to say, really quick shout out, I got to be a guest on a podcast this week.
Ooh, tell me about that.
So I was on 3 Interesting Things, which is a podcast that scours the news and finds some kind of bizarre stuff that's happening in the world. And we got to talk spooky paranormal stuff. It was a lot of fun. So I definitely recommend checking that out. Don's a great guy. It's a blast.
Fantastic. It's called 3 Interesting Things?
Yep.
Okay. We also got a little tweet from somebody, too.
We did. I want to get his name right.
We're going to give a shout out because when you guys interact with us, it makes our day. We wake up.
It really does.
And it's nice to know people are listening.
Yeah, I woke up to these tweets and it was really excited because this person was super excited. So really quick, I want to give a shout out to George. I'm not going to give his last name because that feels really personal on Twitter. But hey, George, thank you so much for reaching out. That was super cool of you.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening to blah, 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 blah. Sorry. Thanks for listening to supposedly, not blah, 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 blah.
And thanks for doing whatever Jessi just said because I'm sure you do that too.
We really appreciated your suggestion. I think we've already covered it, but if we haven't, I'll be sure to throw that in coming up.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
One more thing. Okay. Some housekeeping from last week.
Okay.
Of course, last week we had our guest Christian B. Roper, who's been recently featured on the History Channel's Beyond Oak Island. As a little thank you gift for coming on the show, Rue and I had sent him a stuffed fish to kind of poke fun at the Snuggling a Gar story that he told. And this morning I received a picture. Rue, do you want to describe that picture?
We'll ask Christian if he doesn't mind us putting it up on our socials because it's just too good. It's a picture of this little stuffed fish that we got him, which is not little. It's a good sized stuffed fish. I mean, it's no gar. But
it was the smallest stuffed fish that I could find that wasn't a cat toy.
Well, it still kind of is a cat toy because this picture is his cat holding it by the tail in its arms. And the cat's face is like blurred out. Its mouth is open and its eyes are like, oh my God.
The cat just looks elated that he found this fish.
Like, it looks like the cat is in the middle of saying, bro.
So shout out to Roscoe the cat as well this week.
Yep.
Hope he's enjoying Christian's thank you gift.
Yep. So I think you're first this week, right?
I hope that I am because I'm a little excited to talk about this.
Okay, tell me.
I'm going to call this story That's So Raven.
Is it about psychic teenagers?
No, this is not a nifty nostalgia. Okay. This is a superstition.
Ooh. You know, I gotta say, Jessi.
Uh-huh.
I'm not superstitious.
You're just a little stitious?
I'm just a little stitious.
If people are still listening, I'd be surprised after that one.
Stick around, George. It gets better from here, maybe.
And Roscoe the cat.
Yeah, right. Those are our 2 listeners. All right, so tell me about your stitions.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, hang on.
Okay. Guys, I broke my co-host.
I'm like the Jimmy Fallon. I break so easily.
Wow, so actually you guys can't tell because I edit so beautifully. It's been 36 minutes of Jessi just straight laughing that I've had to cut out at this point.
No, it hasn't.
That's true. It's actually been 57.
You're going to start it again. Hang on. Okay.
All right.
All right, so I don't know if a lot of people know this, but the Tower of London is home to a set of 7 ravens. And there's a reason why, and it is because of a little stitious. Okay, so when most people think of the Tower of London, most people think of torture, prisoners, missing princes, and perhaps Anne Boleyn's beheading. But what they don't think about the tower is their historic ravens. And the US is kind of going crazy about this because there was a news story that was released today about the ravens, and I'll get to that in just a second. But what you need to know is that supposedly there's a legend that if 6 ravens kept in the Tower of London happen to leave the tower will fall and the kingdom with it. And I had a really hard time trying to pinpoint when this legend started. Now, some people say it takes place and kind of originated in World War II, and some people say that during the reign of Charles II, it already existed. Because there is documentation that during the reign of Charles II, there were hundreds of ravens that called the tower home. So they even start interfering with the astronomer John Flamsteed, who had an observatory there. So John kind of gets a little pissed about this, and he goes to the king and he asks and pleads that the ravens be removed. Well, King Charles says, how about we remove you instead?
To be fair, that's also how I feel.
Yeah, he's like, it's their home. Yeah. So he instead moves this observatory to Greenwich, and he does take into account that the raven population is getting a little bit out of hand at the Tower of London. So he removes all except for 6 ravens at the time to preserve this, the tower's integrity, if you will.
Okay.
Well, we're talking about this today because one of the ravens that is currently kept at the Tower of London, Merlina, is it Merlina or Merlina?
I think it's Merlina. I think it's
Merlina?
like the
Merlina?
feminine of Merlin.
Merlin,
so I would say
right.
Merlina.
So the raven Merlina has been missing for about 2 weeks in... Possibly that could be because it's the end of her life. So I don't know if many people know this, but there is an official job of the Raven Keeper at the Tower of London, and the current one's name is Christopher Stakeef. He's been a Raven Master since 2011, and he's charged with the care and daily upkeep of these magnificent birds.
How do I get his job when he retires?
Well, you have to be appointed by the former Raven Master, and the Raven Master has to really see something in you because it's quite a prestigious title.
Well, I'm coming for your job after you're done with it. I don't want it right now. But
So I love this guy, by the way. I've watched a lot of videos of him explaining about his daily upkeep of the birds and the bird hierarchy. So I'm going to tell you some fun things about the ravens, and then we'll talk a little bit about our poor missing Merlina. Currently, there are 7 ravens kept at the tower today. They keep about the required 6, plus 1 spare just in case. Although, sometimes that number fluctuates, because in the past, some of the ravens have had some chicks. Do you want to know their names?
Don't ask them questions. Of course I want to know their names.
Well, there's Jubilee, Harris, Grip, Rocky, Aaron, Poppy, and of course, our poor missing Merlina. Their lodgings are found next to the Wakefield Tower, and they have several different cages. Now, Merlina's a particularly special bird because not only is she the oldest bird there, but she's also the leader. They call her the Queen of the Ravens, and she takes up residency separate from the other ravens in the Queen's house on the plot of land at the Tower of London.
Interestingly, that's also what I'm called.
You're called the Queen of the Ravens? I love it. That fits you so well. And as far as the Pyramid of Power goes for ravens, yeah, it always comes back to the Pyramid of Power, guys. She's the tippity-tip-tip-tip-top raven.
Right on.
All right, the ravens are creatures of habit, and they get really upset if their daily routine is interfered with in any way. In fact, they have to be put to bed in a very specific order, and if anyone tries to deviate from that order, they get upset, and they won't do it.
I love that.
But let's talk about some naughty ravens, shall we?
Of course. Cheeky, if you will, since we're in Britain.
Cheeky ravens. All right. Well, the raven Merlina actually escaped once before, I think. So I'm going to say it's Merlina, but I watched a ton of videos where they talked about this escape of a previous bird, and I couldn't tell if they said Merlin or Merlina. And I don't know if Merlina is a descendant of Merlin or named after a past bird named Merlin.
Gotcha.
I couldn't find a consecutive list of all the ravens to inhabit the tower over the years. So let's just say it's Merlina, but it's very possible it could have been a bird named Merlin, and with the British accent and how fast they said it multiple times.
We're going to say supposedly.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
The Raven Merlina escaped once before and was gone for 2 days, after which Raven Master Christopher receives a phone call from Greenwich Observatory, where the observatory was moved, funny enough. A citizen in Greenwich had spotted a raven in his yard. So the Raven Master phones him up and asks him if the raven's still there. And he goes, yeah, I think it's a raven. And the Raven Master asks, well, do you have any chicken in the fridge? So the guy says, yes. And the Raven Master says, do you have a blanket? And the citizen says, yes. Okay. And then the Raven Master asks if he has any gloves. And at this point, the citizen's a little confused, and he's like, what am I going to need gloves for?
See, I would be confused. I'd be like, I've been waiting for this moment my entire life.
I know where this is going, right?
I know where this is going. I'm already outside.
So the Raven Master says, you're going to catch the raven for me. And he goes on to say, the Tower of London and the monarchy depends on you right now, sir. And then he instructs him to put the chicken in his front yard and in his garden. And when the raven goes to eat it, throw the blanket over it and keep it until the Raven Master arrived. Well, this citizen, gold stars to him, because he did it, and Merlina was safely returned to the Tower of London, and all was well in the kingdom yet again.
Aw, yay.
Next up in the Raven Hall of Shame, there's Raven George, who was dismissed and let go because he was caught repeatedly eating television aerials. And in 1981, Raven Grog was last seen outside of the Rose and Punch Bowl, which was an East End pub at the time. So he kind of flew the coop. So those are some of the ravens that have been shamed by me today.
Been let go from their employment.
Yeah, but let's talk a little bit about what's going on today. So, unfortunately, Queen Raven Merlina has been missing for 2 weeks and is feared dead at this point. As we've talked about the superstition with the tower and the kingdom falling, don't worry. There are 7 ravens always kept at the Tower of London. And unfortunately, with Merlina's passing, the birds will be mourning her. But there is said to be a new chick on the way to the Tower of London as we speak to take her place. And if she happens to return, then there's just going to be 8 ravens at the Tower of London. We're a little worried that she may have passed away. She was an older bird, but there's a chance she could come back still, and we're hoping that does happen.
I hope that they find her at the pub, just having a grog, if you will.
Here's a quote from a spokesperson from the tower. Since joining us in 2007, Merlina was our undisputed ruler of the roost, queen of the tower ravens, the spokesperson said. She will be greatly missed by her fellow ravens, the Raven Master, and all of us at the tower community.
Oh, poor Merlina.
Oh my gosh, I almost forgot another raven on the Tower of Shame. The Tower of Shame. No.
The Tower of Shame. That's what it's called.
In the Raven Hall of Shame. I don't know which raven this is, because the Raven Master didn't mention this raven by name in the video.
He's like, he spits on the ground. He's like, we don't even speak that name here.
No, so there is a raven that they constantly get reports about as being dead. Oh. And the Raven Master tells whoever calls in, just watch him for a few minutes. Apparently, one of their cheekier younger ravens likes to lay on his back with his wings spread and feet in the air to play dead for attention when he feels he isn't getting his due.
That's the greatest.
So, Raven who plays dead, you are now added to the Raven Hall of Shame. And that's so Raven.
That's so Raven. I don't remember any of the other words.
You know what? Watching these different videos and doing research on them, I really fell in love with them because they all had their own personality. They all get fed mostly a diet of meat or blood-soaked biscuits, and then once a week they're given a chicken egg. The Raven Master goes up to these birds and he just hands them an egg very delicately, and they open their beak and he puts the egg in their beak, and then they just hop off on the ground with their chicken egg away from the other birds, and they all scatter and go eat their little egg treat they get once a week.
That's amazing. I definitely, when I was at the tower, there were some dumpster diving birds, and I don't know that they were the official ones. I think they were just tourist birds. But they were like whole ass in the trash cans and like came out with a hamburger, and I was just like, I'm kind of proud of you and very impressed.
I once saw a squirrel. I was shooting a horror film at a hotel, kind of motel situation, and we were sitting outside waiting for the crew to finish loading in gear, and I see this squirrel, and he's struggling to get this big waffle. Like, you know those waffles at the waffle irons you make at breakfast? there was a whole one just laying out on the ground, and this little squirrel was, with all of his might, trying to climb this tree with this massive waffle that was 2 sizes bigger than him. And he would fall down and get discouraged, and then he finally got up to a branch, and he held this giant waffle and looked so happy and was just eating it, and I took a picture, and it's the best thing I think I've seen in my life.
I want that to be a Super Bowl commercial.
It was incredible. It was very motivational. You know that picture of the cat that's hanging there? No.
Hang in there.
Squirrel waffle could kick cat hanging in there's butt. It's motivation. You have to fail before you get your waffle sometimes, guys.
Yeah. That's wise words. You heard it here first, folks.
Okay. What did you bring for me today?
Okay. Hold on. I'm gonna need a drink for this. Let me grip it and rip it.
All right, hang on. I'll go with you.
Okay.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Wait. We can do a toast that my friends passed down for a long time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, here's to you, and here's to me. Friends forever we shall be. If we shall ever disagree, fuck you, and here's to me.
There you go. I like it.
No, I love you. It's just an old, like, when you have a room full of people yelling at it, it's an old.
Hell yeah.
It's like an Irish toast, I think. I don't know.
God, I miss that whole situation.
A room full of people?
Just drinking and having a jolly good time and being together and, yeah.
Look, I got touched for the first time. That sounds really wrong. No,
By an angel?
Not like that, but like one of my friends gave me a hug the other day, and it was the first time I had been touched, like, seriously since the pandemic started last January? Whatever.
March, yeah.
Yeah, so I just, like, tensed up. I didn't know what to do with it.
That's fair, yeah. So I guess in other words, you were touched for the very first time?
Shut up. No, not like that. It was a hug. But it was just weird. Like, I didn't know
All right,
how to
Madonna.
I didn't know how to receive, like, common touch.
Yeah. Pandemic's such a bummer.
Right? You've had your drink. Take me to where you're going to take me on this story you've been researching for weeks. Which is why I kept mine very short this week, guys. It's just a little beak wetter for Ruse.
A beak wetter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is one of my absolute crowning glory favorite stories in the whole world.
I am so ready.
All right. So, and also it's weird, this case has some similarities to another case I've covered, the Chris and Lisanne missing hikers in Panama story. I just like a good missing hiker.
I believe we called that one No Bras in Nature. If you guys want to review that at some point.
Yeah. I guess missing hikers just fascinate me. I've always wanted to do a long through hike. And so I don't know why the bad part of that interests me so much, but it does. Anyway, today we are talking about the Dyatlov Pass Incident.
I'm so excited.
I'm so excited too.
I want to hear about it. Let's go.
All right. So the year is 1959. And much like right now, it is late January.
Ooh, timely and creepy.
A group of students and alumni from the Ural Polytechnic Institute and a ski instructor are preparing for a difficult trek up the Ural Mountains. So we're in Soviet Union, now Russia, at this point. So the hike was going to end up at Mount Otorten, and this was going to be a 7-mile hike, and it had the hardest classification in the Soviet Union at the time.
Wow, that's really saying a lot because it's frozen, right? We're talking about some icy, snowy tundra.
In January.
Right. Oh.
Yeah.
That's
so it's
not easy.
It's hard. So let's talk a little bit about who our crew is.
All right.
So first up, we've got the leader of the expedition, Igor Dyatlov. He's 23 years old, and he's a radio engineering student who is fanatical about radios. He even built a whole bunch of them from scratch.
Wow, impressive.
Especially because during the Soviet era, shortwave radios were banned, but Igor still built a whole bunch of them and even took them on previous expeditions.
Okay, so he's a little bit of a rebel. Why were shortwave radios banned at that time?
Because Soviet Russia be like that. Yeah. I think it was just because it was like something that you could do that the government didn't necessarily know about. And they were like, we're supposed to know about everything. Okay. So like I said, he brought these radios on other trips, but at the time he just decided it wasn't worth the burden to bring it on this trip because at this time these radios weighed over 100 pounds. And so you'd be better off to spend that weight on like blankets.
Right. Okay, look. if I'm going through the frozen tundra, I don't want a ton of extra weight. 100 pounds worth of radio just doesn't seem like a practical thing. Right.
Yeah, it doesn't. And so Igor was just a huge outdoorsman. He loved nature. He'd write these beautiful poems about hikes that he'd been on and fields that he'd hung out in. And he's actually who this pass gets named after. So now it's the Dyatlov Pass after him. Okay. Yeah. All right, next we've got his right-hand man and his best buddy, Yuri Krivonishenko, who's also called Yorgi. And he is also...
Yorgi and Igor forever.
Yeah, I know. He's also 23 years old, and he's a construction and hydraulics student. He's kind of our class clown and would provide some comedic relief to Igor on their trips. He would have turned 24 just 5 days after he died.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Yep. Next, we've got Yuri Yudin. He was 21 years old, and he was an economics student with an interest in geology.
Ah, he's a rock guy.
Yep.
He's a rock star.
So next, we've got Yuri Doroshenko, who is also 21, and like Igor, he is a radio engineering student. He's sort of our alpha male archetype, and he was kind of this hot-headed, impulsive guy.
So we have 2 Yuris.
We are going to have 3. This is our third, because remember, Yorgi is also a Yuri.
Oh, wow. Okay. You're going to really have to help me with names along the...
I got you, yeah. It'll get easier.
Okay.
Just bear with me.
I'm barren.
Anyways, so he's our impulsive, alpha male kind of guy. So much so that supposedly during a different camping trip, he went head-to-head with a bear. Like, a bear wandered into their camp.
Like, he fought a bear?
He fought a bear armed only with a geologist's hammer. Which
is a tiny hammer.
The most Soviet Russia thing I can think of. Let me fight this bear with a tiny rock hammer.
Tiny rock hammer.
Yep.
Woo! Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's only 21 at this point, so he's like a little-ass kid, teenager person fighting a whole-ass bear.
I mean, but it sounds like he won, so good on him.
Okay, so next we've got Zenaida, or Zina, Kolmogorova. She was 22, and she was also a radio engineering student. She is a badass hiker who'd actually survived a venomous viper bite on a different expedition.
Wow. Okay, so these people have been through some stuff, even at their younger ages.
Yeah.
Man.
You ain't seen nothing. So meet our baby of the group.
Wait, you can fought a bear with the geologist.
Maybe not in interesting, but like in impressive.
All right, hit me.
Our baby of the group is Lyudmila Dubinina. She's called Luda. She was 20 years old, and she was an engineering and economics major, but her hobby was photography. 2 years before the incident, so when she's 18, she'd been hiking on a different trip and got shot in the leg, Dick Cheney style, by a hunter while hiking the Cheyenne Mountains and managed to hike her way back out.
Okay, so basically we have a group of badasses, right? Like, I'm just gonna say it. Like, badasses.
Certifiable Liam Neeson badasses. Yeah. And so we've also got Alexander Kolevatov. He's 24. He's a physics student with a passion for nuclear physics. We've got Rustic Slobodin, who was 23, and he'd actually already graduated from UPI with a degree in mechanical engineering. So also these people are all freaking geniuses. They're like nuclear physicists and engineers and...
Right. They're very intelligent.
Yeah. And Rustic also had a passion for distance running. He was also kind of known to be a little bit of an introvert and didn't really...
That's okay. We love our introverts here, supposedly.
Yeah, he was just a little more shy. He didn't like to be photographed, really. He just kind of kept to himself. We've got Nikolai Thibault-Brignon, who was 23, and he was also a graduate from UPI with his civil engineering degree. He was a popular guy and was known as a sports star during his university days. Yeah. And now we've got our oldest member of the group, and this guy has a couple different names. So he's either Simon Alexander or Sasha Zolotaryov.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. So he was added at the last minute after somebody else dropped out, and Igor knew him basically as a friend of a friend, but no one else on the trip knew him.
Right, he's a little older than all the others. Okay. Yeah. Is this the ski instructor?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he was a World War II veteran, and he was, like I said, a local instructor for hiking and skiing and that kind of jazz. He'd joined the expedition to qualify for his master certificate in ski instruction and mountain hiking. So he was like, if you guys are going, I kind of want to get this next certificate anyways, and this hike's going to be hard enough to earn that.
Might as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, like you've mentioned, all these hikers are super proficient, nay, I say badass, who've fought bears and snakes and bullets and, yeah. Snow.
Bears and snakes and bullets and snow. Oh my.
Oh my. And so after this hike, they would be receiving their grade 3 hiking certifications. And so what that certificate was is it's the highest level of USSR certificates for hiking and exploring, which basically means like you're worthy of going on these hard hikes. And to earn this, you would complete 300 kilometers, which is just short of, I think it's like 186 miles of hiking, with a third of that being in challenging terrain, i.e. up a mountain in the snow. Yes.
Why do you need the certificate? Couldn't you just, like, go if you wanted?
I think it may have to do with,
you're probably gonna die, but couldn't you just, like, up and decide to go?
I think it may have to do with, like, getting clearance to like, get a pass to go to some of these places. I'm not really sure if it's just street cred or if it actually means that you're eligible.
Or if they saw it as something to put on their resume, perhaps they're applying to work in different areas that are isolated, and that would put them over the top of the job market. Yeah. All right. Okay.
And they're all, like, early 20s, so it sounds really cool to be the most proficient hiker.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, these guys are all really physically capable and have a lot of survivalist knowledge and hiking experience already under their belts. So they're the most prepared people you could expect for this kind of trip. This isn't you and I deciding we're gonna go trekking through Siberia for a week.
Okay, first of all, you and I are never going trekking through Siberia for a week.
Do you realize that during this I looked up how long it would take me to drive to this place?
Really? And you gotta let me know now. What is it?
2 days. It's about the distance equivalent from here to this area as it is to drive from California to, like, New York.
Wow.
So it's a trek, but yeah, I probably won't be going to Russia anytime soon, but
I've had enough snow lately. We've had on and off snow here and ice, and it's just been too much. So I would not sign up for freezing trekking. I shot in the snow yesterday, and it was ugh.
Yeah, we've got about 4 inches right now just sitting there. I hate it. Okay. So a little bit of context on the Soviet Union, just so we kind of understand where we're at in the time frame. So at this point, Stalin is dead, and they're experiencing what was called the thaw. And so this is where things are kind of opening up a little bit more. There's some exchange of ideas, sort of I think what Americans think of as, like, ultra-aggressive communism is a little bit tapered down.
Tapering off, yeah.
You're allowed to, like, listen to music kind of thing. You know, it's thawing. And so the climate of this time was super exciting to be a young person. You know, you're watching things open up. There were new things to experience that, like, your parents were like, oh, that's been illegal since I was a kid, blah, blah, blah. It's multiple generations haven't gotten to see the level of freedom that young people in this time frame are experiencing.
Okay.
So, which, I mean, probably just makes it even more exciting to be this really badass hiker kid who's also a university student. You know, their whole lives are ahead of them at this point.
And they're getting to do all this new stuff. Kind of, I mean, it's not the same thing, but when the internet came out for the first time, it's a revolution. Mm-hmm. It's a new thing that the older generations that didn't have. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the adventure begins. It's January 23rd, and the squad takes a train from what is now Yekaterinburg, which is about 1,000 miles east of Moscow, and it's pretty close to the border between Russia and Asia. So fun fact about this train ride, they didn't buy enough tickets and just slip past security. Like they bought like 7 tickets, but there were 9 of them or 10 of them.
That's pretty much how any college student does.
Yeah. And they were like,
you slide your wristband off and pass it to a friend type of thing.
And they're like, we'll just hide if the conductor comes by. And apparently Luda was really good at making herself disappear when the conductor came to check tickets.
Luda.
All
right, love it.
So on the 24th, they arrive at Sarov for a layover, and Yorgi, remember he's our class clown, was temporarily detained by the police.
What did he do? Was this part of the ticket thing?
No, he was soliciting and singing out loud and playing the mandolin that the group brought. And because it's Soviet Russia, singing is illegal in train stations.
Oh, that's kind of sad. So he was playing and he was getting some tips and aw.
He was pretty quickly released. It was kind of a non-issue. They realized that he was just a dumb kid being a dumb kid.
Right. You mean he wasn't trying to cause harm by standing in the train station
Wow,
singing?
amazing.
What?
And so they kind of had some time to kill before the next train at this point, and because it was so early, there wasn't really anything open. So they just kind of wandered through the streets of Sarov, looking for any business that was open that they could get warm in, and they found a school, and one of the teachers took pity on them and let them in as long as they would come and give, like, a presentation to the students.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, school security seems a little bit lacking there, but all right.
Well, it's the 50s. What do you want from them?
Okay, fair.
Yeah. There's no, like, key fobs and intercoms and yeah. So the kids that they spoke to were between 7 and 9 years old, and they were absolutely infatuated with this group. Zolotaryov, so our dude with 3 names, was singing songs with them, and they were super, super fond of Xena, and they begged her to stay and be a scout leader.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, they were like, no, stay with us. And actually, they ended up writing letters to the university that these kids all went to, looking for answers about what happened to their new friends after the news broke that these hikers went missing.
Oh, that's heartbreaking. Those
letters went unanswered.
Oh.
Yep. And so it's time for them to take their next train. The kids, their teacher actually let them walk with the students all the way to the train station and see them off.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It was super cute. And they, again, were like pulling at Xena's arm and like, please stay and teach us how to be an explorer like you. I know. Okay, so they get on this next train, and this one is taking them north to Ivdel, and it arrived at about midnight on the 25th. In the morning, they took a bus to the frontier town of Vizhai, where they would be starting their hike. So this bus is like a commuter bus. It's very small, and there weren't enough seats for everybody. They were like sitting on each other's shoulders on the back of the seat and just trying to make each other fit. Because there's still like people who are just like, I just need to go to work.
Right, and then they've got their gear too, I'm sure, which is
so
bulky.
It's just cramped.
Right.
And because it was so cramped, it was easy for them to forget someone behind at one of the pit stops on this 2-hour bus ride.
Oh no, you always gotta have a buddy.
So Alexander got left behind, and he unluckily noticed, and actually ran to catch the bus like Peter Parker style.
Oh, okay. Did he make it?
He did.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Or not good in this case.
Yeah.
Don't really know which.
So it's likely that if he'd taken any longer to notice the bus leaving without him, he would have had to wait overnight before the next bus going that way came, and probably would have missed the whole trip. Time was so sensitive that it was like, you're with us or you're not.
Wow.
Yeah. So that morning when they're in Vizhai, Igor went up to the post office and he sent a telegram to check in with the Political Bureau of Extreme Sports to let them know that they'd arrived at their checkpoint. He also sent his dad a postcard. Igor made his intentions to send a second telegram to the Bureau on the 12th of February once they'd
My birthday!
Yeah!
You keep mentioning my birthday.
It's just relevant. It's the best day of the year.
Oh, thank you.
So your birthday in 1959...
Yeah, pretty much.
He
sends a postcard.
Was when they were supposed to return. And so he was like, cool, so we're going to be back in Vizhai on the 12th, and I'll send you another telegram to let you know we're headed back to the school.
Okay.
That return telegram never comes.
Right.
Yeah.
But the dad got the first one?
Yep. The dad got the first one that's like, hey, Dad, we're about to do it. I'm so excited. Yay. And the Bureau of Extreme Sports is like, hey, we've made it to the checkpoint. We're starting our hike. See you on the 12th.
The only letters my mom got when I was at Girl Scout camp was me begging to come home. I hated everything. Like, as an adult now, I could appreciate nature and doing some of the stuff I did back then. But as, like, a 12-year-old with a bunch of other girls shoved into a teepee, I was not having it.
Well, and you're one of those people that likes nature that you get to go home from at the end of the night. You're like, yeah, let's have a bonfire and sing some campfire songs and tell spooky stories, and then I'd like to sleep in my own bed where I have a shower available.
Yeah, look, I grew up poor. My idea of a vacation is not just trekking through the woods constantly. But, you know, I've done it, and it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
I feel like if I went camping more than I have in the past, I would get used to it and I would enjoy it. It just scares the crap out of me at first. I get a little paranoid.
That's fair. We do have like a podcast where bad stuff happens in the woods.
I just assume, like, if you're sleeping in a tent at night, that some axe murderer is going to come and just chop through the tent and kill you. And that's that.
That's
I'm
fair.
not scared of animals or nature. I'm scared of the axe murderer with the axe that chops through the tent.
Well, spoiler alert, I don't think this story is going to make you want to go camping anymore.
Ugh.
Okay.
I've only been like once.
Well, okay. All right, so it's time for them to set out on their trip finally. And so at this point, it's like planes, trains, popes, and automobiles because they've just taken every type of transit. So now they're taking this logging truck from Vijay to this little District 41, which is a tiny unincorporated log community.
Wow. So there's a lot of moving parts here just to get to where their adventure is supposed to begin.
Which should tell you how in the middle of freaking God's holy nowhere they're going.
Right. Absolutely.
And so they're all piled in the back of this truck that's meant to hold logs. They're all kind of shoved up on each other with all their junk in it. It's not a comfortable ride for a couple hours.
I mean, it seems like it hasn't been a comfortable ride since the train, honestly.
It really, hasn't. So on January 27th, the expedition finally begins. They're done with their popes and planes and trains and everything. And they've been doing this since, what? The 23rd.
They left on the 23rd?
Yeah,
23rd.
So like 4 days.
So no. Woo!
Yep.
Okay.
So they're setting off and they're skiing along the Lozva River with a local hired horse-drawn sled to carry their gear. So they make it to an abandoned mine, which is the last people-made structure along the path, and that's where they make camp for the first night. All right, so do you remember one of our Yuris, Yuri Yudin? He's the kid who likes rocks.
Oh, of course I remember Yuri Yudin with the rock hammer. Yeah.
Well, he's not the bear rock hammer guy.
Oh, he's not the bear rock. He just has a rock hammer because he's a geologist. Yeah. Okay, yes.
Yeah, so that night, he tells everyone else that he's really not feeling too good. He's experiencing some joint pain, which was related to lifelong health problems that had always caused him pain, and were part of actually what got him into hiking in the first place. So he had a kind of weak constitution as a kid, and to get stronger, started hiking. But he still had like a congenital heart disease, so...
Oh no! Yeah. And then here he's been on this train and on the logging truck. And...
Exactly, so he was having some sciatic nerve pain after being jostled in the back of a logging truck for 3 hours.
What a surprise.
Yeah. So he's just like, hey guys, not feeling super great. And he's like, I'm gonna muscle through and take some geological samples. So they wake up the next morning on the 28th, and Yuri's just like, you know what, guys, I'm just gonna hinder you. I'm not gonna be able to make it. And he decides to turn back.
Wow.
Because of this decision, Yuri Yudin lived to be 75 years old and died on April 27th, 2013.
Wow. So he survives.
Yep. So Yuri has spoken some about the incident because he is the sole survivor, spoiler alert. And he explained that, he had this inflammation, which he could usually get to ease in the warmth of the sun, but riding in that truck had just made the nerve pain unbearable. He has some thoughts on what happened, and I'll get to that at the end. So a year after the incident, he graduates from UPI, and he was sent to Solikamsk to work at a magnesium plant. He really liked the area and stayed past his contract and actually formed the hiking club Polyus, and he was the group's leader. So he still likes to hike. He never married, and there is some speculation about him and Luda having a relationship.
Oh.
He claimed that they weren't in a relationship and that anything that could have been seen as romantic, like sleeping under the same blanket, had more to do with the culture of hiking and that they all just shared a tent. And, he's like, it was all very professional, but there is some speculation. Part of what strengthens this kind of theory that they had a little bit more than just a friendship or a professional relationship going on is that Luda gave Yuri this little teddy bear, and it was like a little keychain-sized little dude, and he ended up holding on to it until his death.
Oh, but also, even if I had a professional relationship with someone and they gave me something and then they passed, that would be an important thing to me.
I think it's not so much that he held on to it. I think it's more that she gave it to him.
Right. Okay.
So I think it was kind of like a sweet gesture that maybe you wouldn't make for everybody. So at least, they were close. Even if it wasn't anything more than that, they were very close to one another. And that little teddy bear is now at the Dyatlov Foundation Museum. Yuri's ashes were scattered at the Dyatlov Hiker Memorial because he wanted to be able to join the rest of his friends in eternal rest.
Oh, man, you're going to make me
I know.
cry.
Dude, this story is...
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It's a lot. So Yuri's turned back. Now we just have Yorgi and Yuri, who are our two Yuris. So I told you it'd get a little easier to differentiate because Yuri Yudin has turned back. So the hikers are traveling along this river until the 31st. So they're on it for a couple days. Right. And from their journal entries, we estimate that they're traveling at about a mile an hour.
Wait, they're hiking a mile per hour?
Yeah.
In the snow?
Yeah.
I don't think I could do a mile per hour just like in perfect conditions.
I was going to say, it's pretty slow for a normal weather walking pace. Most people...
For you, maybe, not for me.
Well...
I bet I could do a mile in an hour.
Oh, I know you could.
Maybe.
I've walked through Target with you and know you could do a mile an hour.
Fair point.
Okay, so, and I mean, part of why they're going so slow is how tough these conditions are. From weather records, we know that the overnight temperatures were negative 11 degrees Fahrenheit. That's negative 24 Celsius for our European listeners. Yep.
No.
Yo. Gross. So on the 31st, their course leads them away from the river's path, and at this point they cache some of their equipment to that they'll need on the way back, so they don't have to take it all the way, because now we're headed up to Mount Otorten, which is this really hard 7-mile hike, and they're like, yeah,
time to lighten the load
let's not carry everything, we're gonna stow some of this and come back to it later.
Okay.
They hiked about a mile and a quarter to the base of the Koletsiakal Mountain, which is named in the indigenous Mansi language Death Mountain because of how hard it is to travel.
So they're going to Death Mountain. We know they don't make it back alive.
Yep. And so at this point, there's some contention. This is when things are kind of up to speculation, but potentially there was a storm that took the hikers off course to the west because of low visibility. That's kind of speculated, but we know that they end up in a place that they wish they weren't. And on February 2nd, they decided to kind of try and regroup, and they made camp on the north slope of Koletsiakal. Buckle up. Shit's about to get lit.
Oh, okay. I'm ready.
All right. So, happy birthday, Jessi. It's February 12th.
Yay! Except I'm not born yet, but yay!
And the telegram from Igor doesn't make it to the Extreme Sports Bureau.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's assumed that the group's just taking a little bit longer than anticipated. The Bureau's like, you know what? It's a really hard hike. Anything could throw them off by a day or two. Whatever.
Right.
And Igor's sister, who's also a UPI radio engineering student, is like, no, this doesn't feel right. My brother's like a really dope hiker. And so she talks to the school's administrators and, surprise, gets brushed off.
Yeah. I hate when that happens.
I know.
When someone's like, hey, my gut is telling me something is off. And it was like, no, it's fine, whatever, it's fine.
Yep. And in addition to Igor's sister, Rustic's father, who's also a professor at the school, gets nervous, and he tries to get in touch with the UPI Sports Club, but is told there isn't anything that they can do because the club's director, Lev Gordo, is out on a trip of his own.
Okay, so they don't, I mean, at this point, they're just like, we don't know. Too bad.
Yep. So Lev returns on the 18th of February to just this absolute shitstorm, because by the 18th, they're supposed to get back on the 12th, so it's been almost a week later.
And people have repeatedly complained. There's a lot of concern. We're talking about all these kids' families.
And there's just, all the families are freaking out, and Lev's like, oh, sorry, hold on, let me put my bag down. I guess I have to handle this.
Time to deal with this, right?
Yeah, and so at this point, they finally get some news from Vijay to share, and that news is simply the group did not return.
Okay.
So that same day, Yuri Yudin returns to school after spending the rest of his winter break in his home village, and this is the first time that he finds out that his friends aren't back.
Imagine how devastating that would be, or just how freaked out, hoping for the best for them.
Yeah, and he actually alarms a lot of the students there. They're like, oh my god, you guys are back? Because no one knew that he'd separated from the group, and so they saw him and they're like, oh, they're okay! And then he's like, what do you mean? Of course I'm okay. I was with my mom. Right. And then they're like, you don't know? Yeah.
Man.
Yep. So at this point, they kind of go Avengers Assemble, and volunteers are the first on the scene as a search party that included fellow students and teachers from the university starts to do its thing. And before too long, the Army and the Soviet police force will also join this rescue effort.
Wow.
Unfortunately, it's at this point that we are reminded that Igor is an invincible 23-year-old kid who will never die and is totally Superman, because while the searchers are looking for the appropriate paperwork and itinerary documents, they found that he hadn't filled them out, which is effectively not telling anyone where you're going while you are going on the most dangerous hike in the world.
Great. So that was for all the people? Because he's the team leader.
Yep.
Oh,
and
shoot.
So he filed his paperwork. He's like, yep, so hey, Extreme Sports Bureau, we're headed up here. Anyways, bye. And didn't fill out on this day, we're going to be here. And on that day, we anticipate we're going there. This is the route we're taking, blah, blah, blah.
I am a big fan of always let someone know where you're going like, even if you're just going out for a jog as a woman, let someone know. Wow.
Yeah, and so they didn't have any of that paperwork. And so because of this, the search effort is kind of delayed because people have to spend time canvassing fellow students and the team's family members to try and piece together where they could possibly be. So luckily, Alexander had talked pretty extensively with his friend Ignacy, who was a fellow member of the Polytech Sports Club. And this guy was able to map out from memory the route that they were going to take.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and he was able to tell Colonel Georgy Ortyukov, who is a tactics instructor from the UPI military department.
Look, there's a lot of similar names here.
It's Soviet Russia. I don't know what you want from me.
I mean, people probably think the same of, like, Jennifer and Brad in the 80s.
Yeah.
Or,
Probably. And also, can we just talk about how handy and convenient it is that you have a literal colonel in the army who's your tactics instructor that's leading this task force?
I mean, that's pretty handy.
Like, that's who you want.
Right.
So eventually, the search personnel include everything from college kids up to highly decorated 3-star generals of the Soviet army, and they even recruited some of the local indigenous people for navigation help.
Wow, so they've got a big group trying to do some search and rescue here.
It's all hands on deck.
Right.
Despite this, though, almost all the bodies would be recovered by UPI students.
How is that possible?
Numbers. There's just so many kids who are... And you got to think about the circles these kids are running in. They're all friends with the other kids who like to hike. And they're sports stars and popular kids. And
wow.
Yeah. And so just by numbers alone, because all the kids at the university wanted to go look for their friends.
Right.
I do want to celebrate a puppy dog because one of the individual's bodies was found by a search and rescue dog called Alma.
Oh, thank you, Alma.
Yeah, she's a cool puppy.
She's probably not with us anymore, but thank you.
If she is, we have a problem. If there's like a 70-year-old Soviet superdog, we've got an issue.
Thank you for your service, Alma. May you rest in peace.
Yes.
Good girl.
Good girl. All right, so on February 26th, 2 weeks after the group should have returned, the search team found the abandoned camp after an extensive hunt with helicopters, ground searches, and Alma and her friends, our canine units. There were, like I said, literally hundreds of people involved, and the Dyatlov Foundation has done an incredible job collecting all this information. You can scroll through and see just how many people were a part of this search, and it is awe-inspiring. Like I said, a lot of these were UPI kids, and wonderfully, since so many of these students were radio engineering students, the kids are the ones handling communications, which is just so cool that they're like helping communicate between the helicopters and the ground teams. And
I mean, that's baller. That was probably some great experience for them, also, in a work sense. Obviously, from a personal perspective, it's devastating. But.
Yeah. But I mean, this is one of the biggest search and rescue efforts that I'm aware of.
Wow.
So the first strange thing that these rescue teams notice is that the tent appears as if someone had cut a hole from the inside.
Someone needed to get out fast.
Yeah. They also noticed that a lot of the hikers' stuff was still inside the tent. Stuff like their clothes and shoes.
So they weren't wearing clothes?
They were wearing like their long john underwear.
Oh, gotcha.
And, like your comfy clothes.
They're heating layers.
Yeah, but they weren't wearing like their snow pants and outside clothes or their boots.
Okay, so it's like they were getting ready to go to bed.
Yeah, and in fact there was a meal set up, including a cup of cocoa, waiting as if for someone to return to it.
Oh, that's sad.
I know. Around the tent, there were 9 sets of footprints, which would have matched the 9 hikers on the expedition. But interestingly, they were all bare or sock foot, except in one case where one person was wearing a single shoe.
Wow, so something happened. Something happened fast.
You would think, except for the fact that all of the footprints matched with someone who was walking, not running.
All right. They're walking, not running. Got it.
Walking, not running, but they cut their way out of their tent and left in a hurry.
And one person had one shoe on.
Yep.
Right.
So searchers follow these walking footprints about a mile northeast down the slope, which led into the woods. At the edge of the forest, under a tree, the search team found evidence of a small fire. It was under this cedar that they made their first discoveries. Georgy Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko, the best friend of Igor and the dude who fought a bear.
Yeah.
Both of these guys' bodies were found shoeless, and they were only wearing their underwear. A theory as to why they were mostly naked is paradoxical undressing, which occurs as your brain starts to shut down from hypothermia and confuses the signals for hot and cold. Kind of like when you're playing out in the snow and you think that you're hot, but then you get handed like a mug of hot chocolate and you're like, wow, I'm freezing cold.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And so when this gets really bad and your brain kind of starts to not function anymore, it can lead to irrational, I gotta get naked, I'm so hot. And we've seen this some on like Mount Everest.
Yeah.
A lot of those bodies are not appropriately attired. But what makes it unlikely is, so these guys are all so skilled that even if they were all experiencing hypothermia, it's unlikely that they would all undress.
Okay.
You'd be like, someone in that group would be like, hey, this is your brain, keep your freaking pants on.
So it'd be a numbers game, right, too.
Yeah. So above their bodies is this cedar tree, and the team finds broken branches up to 16 feet high, which leads them to believe that one of these young men had tried to climb to get an aerial view of the area, maybe to look for others, try and find camp, or to look at something else entirely.
Try to see if there's a way out of there or
something.
Wow.
Later forensics actually showed that there were embedded skin fragments in the bark of the branches, meaning that whichever boy was climbing like his life depended on it. Like, he left skin in the tree.
Is it possible that he was trying to climb the tree to get away from something, and then he falls out of the tree, and then he dies? What's the condition of the bodies found under the tree, other than partially disrobed from hypothermia?
I'll get to their autopsies later, just because things get too weird to talk about in fragments.
Okay, gotcha.
It's unlikely that he fell just by what injuries do exist. I'll give you that much. Okay, so between the forest and the campsite, because remember that was about a mile away, researchers would find the body of Igor, the leader, and Zina and Rustic. They were found separately, like they're all a couple yards apart sort of thing.
Okay.
And their bodies appeared to be positioned in such a way that suggested that they were trying to get back to their camp. Like, so they were facing back towards the direction of the tent.
Gotcha.
Of course, there was an immediate investigation opened, and autopsies were done on the 5 bodies they found. All 5 autopsies list hypothermia as the official cause of death. Rustic Slobodin had a skull fracture, but they don't think that was lethal.
Okay, so he has a skull fracture.
Mm-hmm.
What's that from?
Jesus, they will not stop blowing stuff up. It's unclear what could have caused that, but it wasn't super duper bad, so like maybe he took a little tumble.
Okay.
We're not really sure what the deal is.
Gotcha. And only 5 bodies have been found so far.
Right.
Okay.
We're still missing 4. And so this team spends the next 2 months searching for them. On May 4th, 1959, the final 4 hikers' bodies were located. Their bodies were buried under feet of snow in a ravine, and how the team was even able to find them just blows my mind. There are pictures of the teams literally walking shoulder to shoulder with long poles.
Just poking them into the ground.
Walk a step, poke and feel for something weird. Walk a step, poke it. And when you understand how big this area that they're canvassing is,
wow,
it's incredible.
That's some work.
Yeah, the search effort alone is just an incredible part of the story. The 4 hikers found in the ravine were more appropriately dressed, and it seems like some of them were wearing the others' clothing, possibly that they'd taken it off their friends after they'd died to try and live a little bit longer.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
They'd also constructed a den for themselves out of clothing and branches, seemingly as a way to survive as long as possible.
And yet some clothing was left behind in the tents.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even if, like, all they took all the clothing, there was still some left. Like, not everyone was dressed.
Gotcha.
To start with. Yeah.
Okay. But I would think you'd want to take all the clothing you can out of there.
I would surely think so.
Or return there to take clothing.
At least your shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's minus 11 degrees and you're barefoot.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is just...
Yeah.
Right.
So they've made this den for themselves out of these cut branches. And the branches are clearly cut with a knife, but there's not a knife found on any of these bodies.
Interesting.
Which is a little weird.
Yeah, but if we're searching that large of an area, and we're doing it by poking sticks and stuff, is it possible that that could just get missed at some point somewhere?
I mean, of course it is.
If it had fallen,
yeah, but I mean, it's weird that you would abandon your knife, because I think that
it's a huge survival thing.
Yeah, like, that's a huge bless if you're in this. I mean, I don't have shoes, but I got a knife. I got a chance.
Right.
Okay, so Luda was found wearing Yorgie's burned and torn pants, and her left foot and leg were wrapped in a torn-up jacket. She was found on her knees with her face and chest pressed against a rocky wall of the den.
Whoa, so she was found on her knees with her face pressed okay.
Yeah.
So pressed against, like, a wall or, like, the ground?
The wall.
I'm picturing wall.
Yep, okay. She's up on her knees, almost like how you would sit to pray if you're, like, a person who kneels to pray.
Gotcha.
Yep, so she's kind of in that position, and, like, she's leaning up against this wall.
Okay.
And so then Alexander and Sasha were found kind of spooning, which we think was an effort for Alexander to keep Sasha warm.
To preserve warmth, yeah.
Yep, and then Nikolai was found pretty close to them, a couple feet away in the den.
Okay.
It's at this point that the authorities are like, maybe there was some foul play at hand. Things are just seeming too weird.
Right, this is very off.
And it's even weirder because the hikers found in the den had weird fucking injuries.
Okay.
Luda had 10 broken ribs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew, okay.
And this gets a little graphic. Was also missing her eyes.
Okay.
Her tongue, and part of her lips.
Wow. But, okay.
Yeah.
What kind of wildlife are we talking about out there? Because I know that wildlife tends to go for eyes and certain parts that they can pull off first. That would be like an eye, a lip, tongue if they can get to it.
And that's absolutely a possibility, but considering that they were all found in the den under meters of snow makes it highly unlikely. Their bodies were too well preserved to seem like that was a viable option. Nikolai had significant skull trauma that did not look like it was possible to be self-inflicted.
Okay.
It looked like someone hit him over the head. And we believe that with this significant of head trauma, he would have been completely incapacitated.
Wow.
Like, he probably would have been mostly unconscious until it killed him.
Gotcha. So
Sasha, this guy who has 3 names, also has 5 broken ribs, and like Luda, his eyes are missing too.
Interesting.
And like I've looked at all of the pictures available. I've seen their corpses, and when they say missing, they mean like black holes in their skull.
Ooh. So like all the way removed.
It's not like gouged out or pecked out. It's like vacant.
Okay.
Alexander's eyebrows were missing.
That's very specific. Like shaved missing or like torn off his face missing?
Torn off his face.
Ah!
Yep. And so we've got people with up to 10 broken ribs, but they don't have the external injuries that would correspond with this kind of breakage.
Like the bruises or things like that?
There's nothing that would indicate that they'd been hit hard enough to crush their bones. It looks like it happened from the inside out.
Ah! Okay. All right. Okay.
The force needed to make this happen is getting hit by a car. Yeah. 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 Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay. Yep.
All right. It's okay. We're okay.
We're okay. It's fine. It's okay. So the authorities worked really quickly to make this whole incident go away.
Oh, of course they did, because that's some unexplainable crap with a lot of people.
And they explained it as an, quote, unknown compelling force which the hikers were unable to overcome.
Was it a weather balloon?
Right. It just, like, literally, that's just so many words for bullshit.
Yeah, that would give me no closure as a parent of these children, as a sibling, as a friend.
Well, and also, so you're telling me that my daughter who was shot on a hike was unable to overcome this compelling force? You're telling me that my son who fought a bear was overcome by a compelling force? No, I disagree.
Right. There needs to be answers there.
Yeah, and like you kind of brought up, they tried to write off a lot of this as just natural decomp. Apparently, Luda was found in a stream, and so they're like, oh, that accelerated the decomp process, but I don't buy it. Public access to any records about the incident was banned for 3 years following, and anything about the investigation was kept highly classified until the 70s.
See, that right there says...
You know something?
says, we know something and it's not good.
Yep.
And we don't want people looking at this at all. But then again, we're talking about Soviet Russia, where it was just now okay to listen to radios. So,
well, and that's the thing too, is that you're gonna question us, like, I'll make you disappear.
Yeah.
Like when Soviet Russia said, "Hey, be quiet, stop asking these questions, look the other way," you either did or you died, basically.
And then, like, the U.S., we still have classified documents from Kennedy assassination, from all sorts of historical events.
Yep. So in the 70s, kind of after the Cold War lets up and stuff, a lot of these documents were released and or brought to light by people who had retired. And because of this huge renewed interest surfaced, and Reddit armchair detectives have hit this case since then and continue to this day.
Oh, I bet. What are some of these theories?
Well, hold on. So first you asked earlier about the autopsies. So in order to have all the information going into the theories, you kind of need to know what the autopsies said.
Okay.
All right, so Yuri Doroshenko was found with pulmonary edema and pulmonary contusion as a result of blunt trauma.
Okay. So his heart had, say that again.
So basically he had fluid in his lungs and his lungs were bruised.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. This one's pretty gross.
Okay.
Georgy Krivonishenko bit off a piece of his own knuckle.
Ew. Mm-mm.
They think it was either to stay awake or maybe to stifle a cry.
Oh, hate that.
That tissue was actually still found in his mouth.
Ugh. Okay. That, it's right up there with the eyebrows for me.
I know.
Oh, okay. All right.
That one's really bad.
Keep going.
We potentially think that he was experiencing this level of discomfort because he had third-degree burns.
Okay.
And he was kind of found positioned near this fire that they'd built.
Where were his burns located?
I think on his face and hands.
Okay.
So there's kind of this theory that he fell asleep kind of in the fire, but the thing is that these burns are too bad to sleep through. Like, even if you're dying of hypothermia, the panic sensors in your brain take over and cause you to move yourself away from the fire.
Wow.
Igor had been vomiting blood.
Okay.
And he had injuries on his hands that looked like defensive wounds, like what you'd get after a fist fight.
Gotcha. So beat up knuckles. Yeah.
Yep. Xena had a baton-shaped bruise on her waist, kind of on, like, her kidney area.
That's very specific.
Very specific.
Okay.
File that one away.
I am filing that one away because that stands out.
Rustic had skull trauma. So like I said, a lot of the hikers had weird injuries on their bodies, bloody knuckles, that kind of thing. But what's weirdest to me is that some of them had bruises, like, on their waists and around their ankles.
Interesting. Okay.
And I have a theory on that we'll get to later.
All right.
So the bodies were said to have orange skin and be prematurely aged. And this was reported by their families during the wake and funerals.
Orange skin and prematurely aged, okay.
So radioactive exposure is said to cause both of these things.
Interesting.
But we have to remember that these guys have been out there between 3 weeks and 3 months, depending on which group they were found in.
Right.
And they've been kind of preserved by being frozen, but they're still dead bodies for 3 months. Like, you don't look cute after you've been dead for 90 days. I'm sorry. It's just not how that process works. And so, potentially, there was radioactivity that caused this orange skin. A lot of people, including myself, believe that this is just morticians doing their best to make you look alive and cover up your frostbite.
Okay, gotcha.
And they basically got, like, a Trumpy makeup job.
Well, if you're... Okay, so I assume that the color of a frozen corpse, and I should ask my sister about this, because she's a forensic scientist, but I believe that kind of be a bluish and even in black areas.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about color correcting... For instance, when you have under eye circles, you correct with a peachy or an orange concealer. So I could see it being the orange to cover the blues.
And also, this is not MAC and Urban Decay. This is 1959 Soviet Russia. Like, they don't have good products.
Don't have the best products.
Yeah.
I get that. I understand that theory. Okay.
That's kind of my thought. However, so Donnie Eicher wrote a fantastic book on the incident, and he was actually able to interview Igor's baby sister Tatiana. And Tatiana said, quote, "He didn't die from the snow. It's impossible. When people are just freezing and cold, the color of their face is not so dark. Igor was 23 years old, and his hair looked like an old man's. It was white. We knew it was Igor from the gap in his teeth. Only the gap."
Wow.
So, like, he was unrecognizable to his then 12-year-old sister.
Oh, imagine being a 12-year-old seeing your brother like that.
And they were, like, besties, too. Like, that whole family was really close. So, unnatural post-mortem posing suggested by livor mortis is consistent with what happens when you move a body after death. And this kind of suggests that some of the bodies were arranged to look like they'd just frozen to death.
Okay.
Which is evidence tampering, but the more friendly idea is that it was, like, the first group who died, their friends found them, and they were like, oh my god, I can't believe this, and they tried to position them in a way that looked a little bit more peaceful.
I could see that. And we also said that the second group might have taken the first group's clothing, so I could see that happening during that process.
Absolutely.
You take their clothing and then you want to lay them in a more peaceful... Yes, yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know that that's, like, evidence tampering as much as I think it's just, you don't know that that your friends are ever going to get found. Right. That's this weather's so bad that you're like, I may be their last chance at a funeral.
At this point, you don't even know if you're getting out of it.
Yeah.
Right.
So Captain Chernyshev made an interesting observation. He said the trees near the fire had been cut with knives, but they found no knives with those bodies, and that it seemed like more work than 2 people could do by themselves. So again, we have another missing knife. We're up to 2 at this point, which is just weird. Because, like, okay, 1, you lost in the snow. 2?
Right. And like you said, it's a survival item. In any sort of survival situation, I'm not parting with my knife. That's that.
Right. Yeah. So to kind of strengthen the radioactive hypothesis, some of the hikers' clothing tested positive for traces of radiation, and some of the clothing was stained a light purple. Now, what's interesting about the light purple is that this is something that we see after processing reagents for decontamination from radiation. Things will sometimes take on a purple tinge from the ingredients used for that process.
Okay. Interesting.
Which is weird because they didn't have those reagents on them.
Right.
And this also kind of strengthens the premature aging claims, the orange skin, all that jazz. So the tent. Remember how I was like, it sounds like they kind of got off track a little bit. Something went weird with that. The way that their whole camp was set up didn't make sense for this level of expertise. It actually kind of looked a little bit amateur. The positioning of it was weird. Like, the angle that they set it up was weird. I mean, they're already in this most dangerous location. It just doesn't seem like a decision that all 9 of them would make.
Okay.
The authorities removed specific items from the camp, like rolls of film, and none of that evidence was ever put on record, so they disappeared it. Also, high-ranking, likely KGB officials were there monitoring the lab while the autopsies were being done.
Of course, right.
And there's also a record of large amounts of alcohol being delivered to the morgues, which was concurrent with a method of protecting yourself from radiation exposure.
Interesting. Okay.
And also, I do want to point out, I mean, like, morgues use alcohol, but it was like a lot of alcohol.
Like a lot.
Like
alcohol.
A lot. Like enough that people were like, hey, it's weird how much alcohol this morgue has.
Hey, it's weird they're shipping tiny child coffins to Roswell, huh? What's happening with that?
What?
You know?
You don't say. And so, kind of like I said, as certain investigators have retired, they've been way more open in talking about the case and kind of what they think happened. And they've said that certain evidence was just completely ignored and certain information was extremely restricted. And a lot of them were encouraged to just not talk about it. All right, so let's get supposed. Theories abound. All right, so up first, there were reports of orange glowing fireballs in the sky over the area the night the hikers died.
Okay.
Which a lot of people think aliens.
Of course.
A lot of other people think missiles.
Both would make sense with the radiation, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a movie called Dyatlov Pass, which is kind of based on the events in this incident. And so basically this group of kids go out and they're like, we're going to solve it. And
it's like Titanic 2.
Yep.
Let's rebuild the ship.
They get into trouble in about the same place and they shoot up flares and they're like, oh wow, they look like orange fireballs. And not gonna lie, that kind of got me. Because I was like, what if that's all it fucking was like them trying to get rescued?
Their flares trying to get help.
Yeah, and people are like, it's a spaceship. I'm like, oh my god, what if it was really just these kids begging for help?
I doubt it was. I guess it depends on the size of the ball of fire and like the activity of the ball of fire.
Yeah, and so I doubt it was, but like I watched that movie because I've watched literally everything I can find on this, and that one got me good, man. I was like, oh, These kids feel like my kids at this point. I'm like,
right.
My babies.
You're the same age as your babies.
Darnell calls them my hiker kids. Because I've been doing so much research. I'll, like, come in very Pepe Silva style. Because I come in and I, like, pour a cup of coffee just in full goblin mode. And I'm like, and he's like, something up with your hiker kids? And I'm like, I can't talk now. And I, like, run back to my office.
Darnell's like, I wish I had Bigfoot stepchildren instead.
Right. So some people think that what caused these kids to get up and freak out in the middle of the night was a slab avalanche. And so a slab avalanche, for those of us who do not hike the Siberian wilderness, is when the snow accumulates and gets too heavy and falls off in a sheet or a slab. And people think that the sound could have woken them up, freaked them out, they cut their way out of the tent, and then because of all the new snowfall, they were lost and unable to find their way back to camp.
Okay.
This theory is weird because of their experience level. Even knowing that they might be crushed to death in an avalanche, that threat would not be as big to them as hypothermia. They would pick crushed by snow over.
But I could see how, in an emergency situation, you're panicking.
So if they're panicking, Jessi, why did they walk?
That's true. Okay, good point.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. And also we have the statistical data that there wasn't an avalanche on that date.
Well, okay, so debunked.
Debunked, yeah.
There we go.
And in fact, this area isn't known for avalanches.
So super debunked.
So double
debunked.
Double debunked. You gotta emphasize it like that if you're doing your Zach voice, because that's where he would put the emphasis. So there is another theory that the hikers experienced a bout of temporary insanity brought on by maybe doing some drugs, which led them to make poor decisions.
But all of them?
Right.
All of them. You know that there's at least a couple people in that group that are like, yeah, drugs aren't for me, or maybe that's a bad idea in a survival situation. Or, you know, I doubt that all of them would be doing that.
And that all of them would share that delusion. Yeah.
Did the autopsy have any toxicology reports with it?
None that I found.
It would be hard in 1959.
Yeah. There is another idea for the temporary insanity hypothesis. And this is a phenomenon called the Kármán vortex street, which is basically when the wind swirls in a very particular way that creates this infrasound that's like an anti-dog whistle that is literally shown to make humans lose their shit and want to just run away from it. And actually, this is a technique that was used last summer by police during the Black Lives Matter protests to try and disperse crowds.
Interesting. So can you hear it, or is it just so high-pitched that you can hear it, but you can't hear it? You know what I mean?
So there are videos on YouTube, and how legit these are, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But basically, it's a sound that you can kind of hear, but it creates some really intense vibrations, like when you're standing too close to a subwoofer.
Gotcha.
And so it's thought that how the wind moves through the slopes in this area can cause this effect.
Okay, but I don't see how that makes you forget your clothes, and...
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to add up to me.
Right. So another hypothesis is a Soviet missile launch.
All right.
And this one bears a little weight to me because it's possible that if you were standing too close to the blast radius, it could create enough force for those internal injuries we talked about.
Yeah, gotcha.
All right. So do you remember our boy Yuri Yudin, our geology boy who headed out?
Yeah.
So they actually brought him in to identify some of the gear.
Oh.
Because they were like, hey, you...
I mean, you've got to do it, but at the same time...
I know.
Oh, that's traumatic.
So he actually couldn't identify a cloth and said that it kind of looked like it was from the military.
Interesting. Okay.
Yep. He also couldn't identify a pair of skis and a pair of glasses.
Those are some pretty particular items.
Yes.
Okay, I could see the glasses. Maybe someone had that in a pocket and he hadn't seen it at that point. But skis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are hard to hide and like, let me just get these out of my back pocket.
Whip those out. Right.
Yeah. Okay, apparently there was no evidence or log of any kind of testing being done during this time frame, which people think kind of blots out the missile test.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like secret shit is secret shit.
I don't know. I don't think that that's a definitive answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that seems sketchy at best that could be the case.
Yeah. But they're like, there's no records, guys, so didn't happen. Like, okay. All right, this is probably the most wild and far out there and classic, supposedly, hypothesis that we're going to cover.
Ready.
Some people believe that the hikers were victims of a, wait for it, Yeti attack.
Okay, I want to hear the Yeti theories. Okay, I'm already saying probably not a Yeti, just because we've got the broken ribs and everything, which, yes, could be animal attack, but no injuries showing on the outside.
Right. There's also no tracks.
Right. Do Yetis eat eyebrows?
Right.
It just seems off.
Well, and also, if I see a Yeti, I'm running. I'm not walking my little sock feet away.
Right. Oh, creep, 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 creep. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know, but then, if you think about a wildlife encounter, if you're face to face with a bear,
I am right now.
a bear,
yes,
or a large creature that could be predatory, do you run and make yourself more like prey, or do you try to gently walk away?
I think if I'm gonna take the slow and steady wins the race approach, I'm gonna put shoes on.
You would think, but okay, hypothetically, there's this Yeti there, right? And let's say the Yeti's just looking up at something in a tree and his back is turned, and you cut your way out of the tent and you try to creep off, right? Do you have time to put on shoes in that scenario? Once again, no Yeti tracks, so I'm calling that this is not the case, but hypothetically.
I mean, I guess, yeah. I just still don't know how Yeti break ribs. From the inside. I know how Yeti break ribs. I don't know how Yeti break ribs inside.
Yeah, okay. I was gonna say you...
Alright, so let's talk about why people think it's a Yeti.
You mean other than the reasons we just discussed?
So this hypothesis kind of got traction because on one of the rolls of film recovered from the campsite, there was a photo.
Did they get a Yeti? Wait, we don't know. We don't know.
What do you mean we don't know?
They took the film.
They took one roll of film, or at least one roll of film. We still have like 6 rolls.
Okay, you didn't tell me that.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, I needed a clarification.
There are actually a ton of photos from the hikers, from the search. The Dyatlov Pass Foundation is an incredible resource, and I owe my entire life to them. And you can see all of the hikers' pictures there, and there are literal hundreds. Okay, so anyways, there's a photo on one of their cameras that is a humanoid, very grainy 1959 technology photo.
Right.
Peering out of the woods that looks almost 97% like someone walked off to the woods, took a piss, and was walking back, and they're like, "Hey, Alexander, look!" Click.
Ugh.
And he was like,
gotcha.
Yeah. It looks more pulling a prank on your friend than Yeti.
Gotcha.
And there's also a hypothesis that it's one of the Mansi people just kind of checking out who's in their area. So one of the indigenous tribal folk.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. But if you think that it could be everyone's favorite snow cryptid, you can check out the Discovery Channel, who is known for their scientific programming such as Ghost Adventures, who really leaned into the Yeti theory in 2014 with their 2-hour special, Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives.
Please tell me you watched that. Tell me you watched it.
I haven't had a chance to, but I might this weekend.
What? I feel like that's a supposedly watch party right there.
There you go. Join our Patreon that we don't have. Like we've said, it probably isn't a Yeti, but it's because of this theory that we're going to take a sharp left turn into Rue story territory, which is talking about racism, because what's a Rue story without racism thrown in the mix?
Right, so I'm guessing this is going to go the way of the indigenous people did it, since we mentioned that that picture could have been...
Bingo bango! A lot of people have pointed to that picture and been like, oh, it's one of the Mansi people coming to kill them. Which is fucked up. Because yes, this is Mansi territory, but these people are super chill. They just pretty much farm reindeer and kind of keep to themselves. They actually hung out with the hikers some. Like, it sounds like they probably had them over for tea on their way out.
Wow.
Yeah, like they were just super chill, regular people. So, basically, this is a case of white peopling, because no matter what country you're in, when there are white people who've overtaken indigenous land...
White people.
And at the time, there was a huge racist school of thought, and they just hated them, and they were like, killed these 9 good communist comrades, wah! Just to try and make people hate them more. It was convenient to fit into their agenda.
I mean, I get it. Yeah.
But actually, the Mansi people were a huge part of the search effort, and actually were really instrumental in navigating the area. And so, like, hey, don't be racist.
Right, and if you're trying to cover something up, it's easy to push blame.
So it's like, how rude for you to then speculate that these people are such, quote, savages that they would hurt these people.
That they did it.
In ways that are congruent with a car accident. Right. Anyways, so there's another school of thought that people believe that some members of this team, particularly Sasha Alexander Simon.
Okay, the ski instructor, the older one.
Yep, was a part of the secret KGB effort, and they were on a mission.
So, how many members do they think were on a mission, or just him?
Him, maybe a couple more. Some people think maybe Yuri Yudin was, and then he got cold feet about being a KGB agent and decided to turn back.
I mean, I feel like that's more dangerous than just completing
literally
the mission at that point, right?
Yeah.
So
you don't live to 75 if you tell the KGB no thanks, I'm good.
Yeah, at the last possible minute. Oops, and I left my other KGB member out there alone.
All right, so in February of 2019, Russian officials agreed to reopen the case. They reviewed case files and they investigated the site and conducted interviews with people who are associated that were still alive. The officials have discounted most of the theories, only looked into 3: an avalanche, a snow slab, or a hurricane. And it feels like pandering because we know there wasn't an avalanche, and I don't think there was a hurricane.
Yeah. I feel like there'd be more damage than just, one tree was missing a couple cut branches, right?
Like, the tent was still standing, and the
way.
cup of cocoa was still in the tent undisturbed, but these kids had their ribs crushed from the inside. Yeah.
But there was a hurricane.
Yeah. No.
Right,
Basically, it just feels like they're like, oh yeah, we're looking into it. Anyways, bye. So they decide it's an avalanche still. So 60 years later, they're like, yep, this is what happened. But the weird thing with this whole investigation is that the deputy head of the Ural Federal District Directorate of the Prosecutor General's office, Andrei Kuryakov, was officially reprimanded by the Prosecutor General, which is the biggest level of punishment before being fired, and the case was once again regarded as inconclusive.
Interesting, okay.
Which, to me, like, maybe he was trying to be like, oh, let's just make it go away again, and they're like, you made it go away wrong.
Yeah, bad job making it go away.
So, one of my favorite theories, like we talked about, goes back to these orange glowing balls and is aliens. The lead investigator on the case in 1959 said, quote, I suspected at the time and am almost sure now that these spheres had a direct connection to the group's death.
Is it weird that I think that aliens is one of the more plausible scenarios that we've presented in this situation?
I was talking to Darnell because I won't shut the frick up about this case.
Right.
And I'm like, sometimes when things are so absurd, the absurd thing is what makes the most sense.
Right.
Because I just don't know how else all of this happens.
I could see the missile testing and then there being some sort of government cover-up or something like that, but that doesn't explain how some of these injuries occurred from the inside. And then we see the orange glowing balls of light. I don't know, I'm tending to lead towards government cover-up or aliens or both at this point.
Yeah. So, Ivanov was ordered to shut the case down, but it continued to stay on his mind for the rest of his life.
Wouldn't it?
Obviously.
Like, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this comes across my desk. It's not something I'm easily forgetting.
Anyway, on to the next. Doop.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, could be a telepathic yeti, could be aliens, whatever. What do we got here in the boring stack?
Yeah. And so, I mean,
another wiretap.
Oh, is that all?
You know?
So, I mean, as far as my theory, I know the government covered something up. I don't know what exactly they covered up, but I know that there is evidence tampering, and there's a lot more going on than we know.
Right.
And I believe, personally, that it was either aliens or a missile. I believe these things because of the internal injuries. I think there was some craft that they were standing too close to. I think they cut their way out of their tent because they either heard, felt, or saw something go up in the sky.
Okay.
And they were like, whoa. And then I think they got out of their tent in like a daze and then like wandered around looking. Those are kind of my thoughts. I also lean towards aliens for the missing tongue and eyes. That maybe it was like a more hostile probing situation where they were like, oh, we're gonna study these eyes.
When you look at cattle abductions, and mutations, surely that's a thing that reoccurs when you're talking about animal abductions. A lot of times they are missing the eyes, the teeth, and have jaws cut in strange ways. Sometimes they're even missing jaw bones.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of those are my biggest theories because of some of the defensive wounds that we see on some of these people.
Okay.
I think that some of these people were held captive, especially Igor, who had the defensive wounds on his knuckles, also because of the weird bruising on his ankles. I believe that those are ligature marks.
I could see
I
that.
think he was bound by the legs, or by the ankles, and I think he was fighting like hell to get out. That's my thought with it, and I think that the radiation could have been a factor in either of those, but that's all I got. Honestly, I have solved this case no less than 10 times while doing this research.
Right.
And then every time I read another sentence on another page and I go, oh shit, I have nothing. I'm like, oh, it's obviously this. And then it's like, oh wait, well that doesn't make sense.
Well, we know one thing for sure, and that it's always going to be a mystery.
Yeah.
Unless those documents get released and unless there's some clarity there.
Yeah. But do you want to know why it's an even bigger mystery?
I mean, I don't know how it could get bigger than this, but go on.
All right. So we need to talk about Sasha Simon Alexander, our ski instructor. Okay, so this part is wiggity whack, because homie is mysterious.
Okay.
To the highest degree.
Interesting.
So first off, what's up with all of his names?
Well, it could just be a nickname. I mean, I have a stage name.
Yeah.
Could be, you know.
So apparently he wrote an autobiography.
Which name did he use?
I think he used Alexander for that one.
How can he be so mysterious and have written an autobiography?
Well, because he didn't give the right birth date, according to the church.
Okay.
Like, he said he was born a completely different date than what the church has on record.
All right, first of all, I can excuse that. One, because I've looked at lots of records, and sometimes they screw up dates on things.
That's true.
I mean, my own social security card was wrong, and my birth certificate had the spelling of my last name wrong. So I can see that being a misprint on the church's part. Or even, like, you know, his father or mother told him the wrong date by mistake. I mean, we're talking at a time when, for the most part, women would have natural childbirth, but the medicines that were administered were close to somewhat twilight sleep at times, so I don't know.
So it's really cute and sweet that you want to make these hypotheses. Let me continue, and then you'll see how fucked up, wild, and crazy this is. All right, so homie is drafted in 1941. He makes it through World War II without a single scratch, which is kind of hard to believe, because almost everyone got some kind of banged up. One time he was directly asked, why did you hide from everyone that you and your brother worked for the Germans during the war? And he just kind of shrugged it off and continued to work for a city which he couldn't write or say out loud. Which is like, what?
I don't know. I'm still excusing him at this point.
Okay. That's fine. So eventually, he gets a job as a PE teacher, because why not?
Okay.
And
he's going down on the, if you're trying to sell him as a mysterious person, him getting a PE teacher job is kind of like, well, there goes all the mystery out of that guy.
Well, it's actually a huge part of it, and here's why.
Okay.
So first off, the corpse that they pull out of the snow is almost unrecognizable as him.
Yeah, but the other little girl said she couldn't recognize her brother except for the gap in the teeth.
Okay, but hold on. So, the body that they pulled out had tattoos all over its chest, including one that said DAERMMUAZUAYA, which has no known translation in any language. And none of his former PE students had seen any of these tattoos. And they'd seen them shirtless because that's what you did in gym class in 1959.
Okay, but how long was the time between his PE job and this?
I don't think too terribly long.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If I'm a master KGB spy or whatever, and I'm gonna leave a body that looks like mine, I'm not gonna pick out someone that has tattoos that I don't. It just seems like a rookie move.
Yeah.
And not burn those or something, you know? You do something to cover them, whether it be removing of the skin, burning of the tattoos. I don't know. Something.
So weirder still is that 7 of the hikers who died in the incident are buried at the Mikhailovsko Cemetery in Sverdlovsk. Sasha, or Alexander, or whoever you want to call him, and Georgi were buried separately in the Ivanovsko Cemetery, and their graves in this different cemetery are right next to each other. Remember, Sasha didn't know anybody before this trip started.
Right.
He only kind of knew Igor.
Maybe it's a religious thing. You know how Jewish cemeteries are separate from Catholic ones?
Maybe.
Maybe it's just proximity to where their families lived or were close to.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they had family members that were buried at that cemetery that their family members wanted them close to instead.
So, a couple of decades later, and a couple of Sasha's relatives all pooled together because they wanted to get him a nicer grave marker than the one that he had. Because at this point, it was just this, like, wire obelisk thing, which wasn't super nice.
Maybe. Do we know that Sasha was straight?
We don't.
Maybe that was his partner and they were keeping it on the DL.
that would be super DL considering that supposedly they hadn't even met until this trip. And for that to be like their shared last rites in 1959 Soviet Union, I feel like is some John Mulaney, not unless everybody gets really cool about a lot of stuff really quick.
All right.
Okay. So the family contacts the cemetery and they're just like, hey, we want to give our uncle, cousin, whoever a nicer grave marker. And the cemetery's like, cool, what's his name?
Yeah.
And they give him the name. And they're like, we don't have anyone by that name here.
Interesting.
And so they have all the burial records, but this grave isn't listed as belonging to anybody.
Okay, that is interesting.
Something is being covered up.
I don't know. To me, that still falls amongst the line of cover up, though. Like maybe the government or whoever took his body and knew that if he were missing from the expedition altogether, there'd be more questions. So they replace it with a prisoner cadaver or something like that.
So in 2018, the family started researching this mystery with the help of the Dyatlov Foundation. Like I said, this foundation is incredible.
Did they exhume the grave?
So they worked to begin the exhumation process, which took over a year because they couldn't really get the appropriate documents when those documents don't exist.
Right, what a surprise.
They're saying, hey, our uncle, cousin, whatever dude is buried here. And they're like, no, he's not. And they're like,
no, he's not.
Can you dig up this grave? And they're like, no, we can't.
No, yeah, right. Not without the proper documents that you don't have because they don't exist.
So eventually, with the help of the foundation, they were able to exhume the grave. And they found that the casket wasn't even there.
Wow.
The grave had been filled in with mostly large rocks and dirt. The body was there, but there was no casket.
Interesting. So, okay. I don't know how Soviet burials were conducted in 1959, but I assumed that there were caskets, right?
There were caskets.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe they couldn't locate family to pay for it, so the government was just like, oh, drop it in, whatever. Drop it in naked.
Interestingly, there were also no clothing, which there shouldn't have been that much deterioration that quickly, but they did find the soles of shoes and
Weird.
2 buttons. Okay. The bones were intact, though, and it was discovered that there was 1 tooth missing. That tooth was not listed as missing on the autopsy report.
So someone pulled it as like a souvenir or something.
The remains are male, and the preliminary research showed that the fibula on the right leg is fused as a result of some type of injury. Forensics experts have not ruled out a bullet wound as the cause.
But we don't know for sure it's a bullet wound, right?
They just know some wound healed. Okay. There's also a strange metal cap on the bottom right wisdom tooth, which has no known purpose at this time.
Okay. Is that it's a radio transmitter?
My fun, super exciting hypothesis is that it's a spy cap.
A spy cap. Okay, tell me about a spy cap. Oh, is that what you would bite to kill yourself?
Cyanide. That they would put cyanide in your... That's my super fun hypothesis.
That sounds super risky, though. I mean, wouldn't they normally give you a cyanide pill?
They would, but there's, like, evidence of spy caps. Like, that was totally a thing.
Okay, well, I would not trust myself with a spy cap.
Dude, I'd
trip and bite that thing.
I can't get a canker sore and leave it alone. Like,
and that's why we're not spies. That you know of.
Who are you talking about? I am for sure a spy kid. Antonio Banderas is my dad. He's Antonio Bandadas. Okay, so he's got this spy cap or just weird cap on his tooth that I definitely think has cyanide. All right, so the skull does appear to be that of Sasha Alexander, whoever, from forensic reconstructive work. So they've compared it against pictures and they're like, yep, that checks out with the pictures. And so his family's like, okay, so what the hell is going on here? And so they decide to do a DNA test on his living niece and nephew, which are his closest living relatives. They found that he's not a match.
Okay, that's suspicious. Are we sure about the paternity of the niece and nephew? Did the niece and nephew come from his brother or from his sister?
They were maternal connection, so his sister.
Okay, all right, never mind.
Yeah.
Then that doesn't add up.
Dude's got some weirdness.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, even if he's not him, he's weird.
I could see that.
But just between being buried at the other place, not technically ever being officially buried there, having weird tattoos, including an untranslatable acronym, maybe?
Well, look, It could be a prisoner corpse that they switched out.
But why does he match the pictures?
Because they made him match the pictures. Let's say I'm a spy and I need a body to sub out for me, or the government has decided that I'm dead and they need to sub a body for me. They're not going to go looking for some 6'2" person with blue eyes and, gray hair. They're going to try to find someone that matches me as closely as they can. So how are they going to do that? They're going to look at funeral parlors for people that haven't been claimed by friends and family. Homeless people, they're going to be looking at prisoners that have been executed that are now possessions of the state, technically. But you could find a close enough match.
It makes me nervous that you're not more bothered by this. Because I am, very bothered by it, and you're definitely a spy right now. You're like, this is what we do in my agency.
No,
Or, this is what spies would do technically if spies did this.
If spies did that, technically that's where you would go, and that's where you would get your unclaimed body, right? But you would match the body as closely as you can. Now, let's say you have two bodies, right? You've got a body that could kind of maybe pass as him, or you have a guy that bears a strong resemblance but has tattoos. You're going to go for the guy with a strong resemblance, and you're going to cover those tattoos in case a family member comes to claim and needs to recognize the face. Plus, we're already talking about you've got massive facial distortion in some of these corpses.
Okay, spy.
I'm just saying, it seems plausible to me that the body in the grave is not him. But, of course, during facial reconstruction, with all the decay that's already taken place, facial reconstruction is not a 100% science. There is some artistry that goes into it.
There is. I just don't think you think this is weird enough.
It's very possible. It's not him in the grave.
Yeah.
It's like a prisoner corpse. I 100% guarantee it. I would bet.
All right, spy. You're literally, at this point, Black Widow. There's no convincing me you're not.
Why? Because I know where to get a dead body? Don't worry about it. It's redacted.
All right.
Dude, I already told you my social security card and my birth certificate were wrong. I don't know.
Because you're a spy. They weren't wrong. That's just your new identity. So, old man Yuri Yudin, who's still alive, well, not anymore, but at this time, was still alive, didn't believe any of this avalanche bullshit. He thinks that they were victims of nuclear weaponry or some kind of super weapon testing, and that the military found their bodies before anyone else did and staged a cover-up. There are some conspiracy theorists, like I said, that suggested that all of these members were special forces, and that Yuri decided to leave the group, and how he didn't get executed, I don't know. But there is some information that kind of fans the flames for this theory, and that's that Yuri Yudin was made by the government to sign an NDA for having military secrets.
Interesting.
And unfortunately, that is the end of the Dyatlov Pass Incident story. Unfortunately, Yuri Yudin has passed away, and with him, a lot of possible answers have. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, has passed away.
Right.
And a lot of the information we don't even have access to still, and a lot of it's been redacted or burned or poofed. But man, this one just gets me. It's sad, honestly. These kids were so young and bright. No matter what happened out there, it's a grievous loss. And judging by biting off your own knuckle, it was not a pleasant end for these kids. And that's what just makes me so sad. And I think that's, and supposedly we often talk about wanting to give victims and survivors telling their stories. And I think part of why I'm so drawn to this case is that these kids none of this should have happened to them. And I don't think we'll ever know why it did. And it just feels so senseless.
It's not going to be in the lifetime of anyone who knew them or is super closely related by any means. What are your theories on the Dyatlov Pass incident? Please let us know if you want us to cover a certain story, or if you have any notes, or just anything you want to talk to us about in general. Feel free to hit us up at supposedlypod@gmail.com and supposedlypod.com.
Yeah. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at supposedlypod. Hang out with us there, and we'll shout you out probably.
Yeah. If you say anything to us, we will probably shout you out. Thanks for joining us on
Supposedly.